Right, good evening everybody, and welcome to another Agile Expertise and Leading in an Agile World meetup. This evening, really pleased to obviously have as speaker for this evening Dean Latchana, who's talking to us about closing the entrepreneurial gap. I'll introduce Dean in a second, but obviously, just to remind everyone, if anyone doesn't want to be videoed this evening for the recording, please to come off video now. And also just to let everybody know that the video will be up on YouTube afterwards for anybody who can't make the entirety of the session this evening. So look, welcome Dean, great to have you here. Dean's a business agility consultant and agile coach here in the UK, based out of London, like myself. And also, if anyone knows, Dean's also the editor of the Agilist newspaper. Again, a non-profit monthly publication that he produces, which is awesome. And I do recommend anybody who isn't signed up to go and sign up to it. And of course, Dean does sort of a lot of these talks, a lot of this thought leadership at groups like these. And also I need to say this evening, big thanks to Expertise Recruitment and Julian Harrison for helping obviously sponsor this, and obviously Agile World as well for being one of the sponsors here this evening as well. Mustn't forget those guys, really important, and thanks very much for your support. So Dean, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, and really looking forward to seeing what you're going to share with us this evening.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Giles, for the warm welcome, and thank you everyone for coming along to this. Yes, thank you also to Chantal and Nick for helping to organise this, creating this platform, these meetups to allow us to come together as a community, and also thank you for the sponsor for the support you're giving us. I'm going to share my screen, so just bear with me as this appears. Just a moment. Okay. All right, the opening slide should be appearing now.
All good.
And so, thank you, Giles. So this is a talk. It'll be around an hour, maybe slightly over an hour, but certainly we've got a hard stop at I understand it, at 7:15. It's going to be interactive to some degree. I always say at the start of my talks that it's not going to be a one-to-many discussion. It's going to be a many-to-many discussion. There's going to be a few points where you guys can unmute yourself or put a comment in the chat or whatever you want. And any kind of feedback or any discussions this generates, and that would be absolutely fantastic. So yes, this talk is on closing the entrepreneurial gap, bridging the worlds of risk-taking and operationalism in large established incumbent organizations, which I have plenty of experience with. These slides are available. If you just hit that link at the bottom, then you'll get to a web page on my site where you can have a look at the slides, download them, and so forth. And I'll be linking to videos and stuff like that, so you can always play back what we're saying here. So a bit about myself. I know, Giles, you've done a fantastic job introducing me, and I'd just like to spend like 1 minute on this as well, just to help frame what I'm going to be sharing and some of the background and experiences I've got. I've been fortunate to work for a number of household name organisations over the years. Started my life at the BBC as a front-end developer. Back in the old days, where I used to assemble HTML pages with using tables. If you know what that means, you know how old that is. Also, in more recent years, I've worked for some large consultancies, such as Deloitte. And also, I am the founding editor of something called the Agilist. It's in my camera. Here's a real life copy of it. It's a non-profit, print-only publication, which is subscribed to by hundreds of people around the world. And it's just a bit of a digest, a way of consuming content from the community for the community in a non-digital fashion, which some people like. It's a bit of a niche. It's a bit of an underground publication, let's say. So feel free to check it out and subscribe if you're interested. So let's move on. So I'd like to kick off with this quote from Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric, and he was very pivotal. He was able to turn this organization around. His tenure lasted, I believe, just over a decade, and he helped revolutionize this company. And I like this quote, which says from him, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. And I'd like us just to pause and reflect upon that. And this is also an opportunity to, once you've had a think, feel free to unmute yourself and just share what comes to mind after digesting this quote. So have a think and feel free to digest how this is relevant to you, your team, your organization, or the wider economy that we're in at the moment. And you may want to think about the kind of black swan events of 2020 as well. So yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and share what's on your mind.
The first thing that comes to mind, Dean, there is the mindsets. Something that I know we've been talking about and been talking to others as well, where you have a different mindset in terms of running a business and changing a business. And it's very easy to stay inside and to think that you're hanging on and looking after everything inside the building, as it were, or inside the organization. And suddenly you find that things have changed beyond recognition when you look outside. Like and I think that you need the two types of people to work together in an organization that look out and look in. Maybe it's quite a scary quote, to be honest.
It is, yeah. It's quite stark and quite profound as well. Thank you, Alistair. Anybody else like to share a few thoughts on what comes to mind?
Yeah.
I'd like... Go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead first. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to be concise. Coming from a background of strategy, this kind of statements just makes me wonder what is the intention behind the statement, because if it's taken out of context, it might be very much misunderstood, because losing speed in companies is pretty much daily business, because you don't run in just one direction. Otherwise, running companies would be very trivial. And I'm not just talking about designing a product or even just one feature in a product. I'm talking about running an organization and making it survive or even thrive in a market. And so for me, it's like with the yin and yang, or the path of the middle, or story of balance in life, and depending on the culture you come from, there's always going to be phases where you're losing speed in one way and trying to balance it out, but you got to keep focus on the big picture. Why are you going with the whole company, or with the whole team, or with the whole product? Are you still setting the right, steering towards the right direction? So my reaction to this is, it's normal that there are many moments where the organization feels like it's losing speed in one direction, and it asks itself if that direction is very important, and then it's the right moment for a change, for a for a mini catharsis, I would say. That's my reaction to the statement.
Thank you for sharing your reaction. And one thing which particularly resonated with me is that yin and yang. And my little understanding of yin and yang is that it helps to represent order and disorder. And I think that, and within calmness and order, there's a place for disorder. And within disorder and complexity, there's a place for calmness and order. If we think about the contrast between the black and white side, and there's an opposing circle within each of those sides there. And I think perhaps that's being somewhat philosophical, but I think if we think about the ambidextrous organization, if we think about operationalism, we also need the entrepreneurialism, and both can coexist, and they should both coexist. But I think incumbent organizations have got that balance, perhaps too weighted towards operationalism, and that's what we're going to dive into. So thank you for sharing. Perhaps we have one more thought. Feel free to unmute yourself, please.
Hi, Dean. Hi. For me, or how I could read it was like, if your competitors are innovating at really high pace, right, and your company is not innovating at the same speed or exceeding that speed, then obviously the end is near for the organization. That's what I could understand from this sentence.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on. So this is the question I'm going to be posing throughout the talk, and that is, how can organizations create the ability to rapidly respond to change? And that word responsive, so to me that is associated with a mindset of sensing and responding rather than trying to predict and control. This year's been a year where taking a predict and control mindset has been one which has become less relevant, and the one where we need to sense and respond has become a lot more acute and a lot more important with organizations. And I think that organizations have developed a competency in being able to predict and control, but as the world becomes more and more complex, more interconnected, faster paced, they need to regrow that capability to be able to sense and respond and be able to adapt. And as agilists, like many of us are, know and breathe this. And I think this is where we can help our organizations and our clients and our colleagues. So how can organizations create the ability to rapidly respond to change? So before diving into that, I'd like to give a bit of background, some sources of pressure which many organizations are in. And there are three different areas, and there's one area that I'd like to really dwell on today. So sources of pressure. So one of them is market disruption. Customers are fickle. Their wants, needs, and desires are quite often unarticulated. There are new entrants into the market. There are disruptors who are backed by debt, backed by venture capital, and they are continuously probing the market. It's just absolutely relentless. And if we are part of an incumbent organization, we need to be able to respond to that market disruption. Another source of pressure is increased uncertainty, regulatory change, economic, political uncertainty, increased digital security risks and other types of risks. And as has become very apparent, there can be public health crises as well, which has, these are black swan events. A black swan event is something that we could not anticipate. And so if we rely too much on the predict and control, then we're setting ourselves up for some dangers and some potential risks that we need to be able to address. But the area that I'd like to really explore with you guys today is looking at some of the internal complexities. That's a source of pressure. And think about how organizations have, for a matter of fact, actually benefited from Taylorism. So Taylorism can be described as a way of working where there's a deep specialism, where there is like a chain of value which we're creating. But what happens, and quite dangerously, is that we begin to look too close at the details, being able to have operational excellence in something which may have been successful yesterday, but less relevant today, and certainly less relevant tomorrow. And the internal complexities where, with that deep specialization and that siloed organizational structure, we become quite glacial. We become quite calcified and unable to respond to the faster clock cycle of change or business model disruption. And something else which is really, really important, it all starts with the individual, all starts with the team, and understanding that we do become quite comfortable and quite naturally we want to be able to conserve and repeat things which are successful, but we also need to be able to look for opportunities, as perhaps what Barry O'Reilly's made on popular is been looking for opportunities to unlearn and act our way to a new way of thinking, he would say. And that ties into learning anxiety and survival anxiety. So we'll dive into that in a moment. So some of the realities, just looking at that third one there, of internal complexities. So I'd like to just open up on three of these. There are many. One is pattern entrainment. The other one is this notion of operationalism versus entrepreneurialism. And then having a look at alignment not actually being the problem in many large organizations. There's something else which is a bit more profound. And this is from a HBR study that was done a few years ago. So first of all, let's have a look at pattern entrainment. So pattern entrainment is a phrase that I've learned and grown to really like, and it's a phrase that Dave Snowden, who made popular the Kinevin framework, he uses that quite a lot. And pattern entrainment is an individual psychological, a team level, an organizational phenomenon where, as I mentioned before, we tend to find things which are successful. And we can think about things in terms of career development or individual development or child development or whatever it might be. This is a phenomenon which operates at many different levels of society as well. We develop a deep specialization in something which can make it difficult for us to unlearn and relearn something new. So what I've described, what I'm illustrating here is black cab drivers who 20 years ago would have learned the streets very well around the Canary Wharf business district in East London. And they developed a deep specialism to such an extent their neurological pathways would become fixed. And you can actually study that in the shape of the hippocampus. It actually grows and is shaped to map the knowledge that they've acquired. But as the years ticked on, as the Canary Wharf business district developed, that road layout changed, the landmarks changed, and they found it particularly difficult, more difficult than a regular driver to navigate these streets. So this is an illustration that individuals like organizations find success, ways of working, mindsets, expectations, perhaps even biases, which may be appropriate to yesterday, but less appropriate to today, and certainly potentially less appropriate to tomorrow's world. So that's one impediment to change. The other one is around operationalism and entrepreneurialism, and I'm going to build the next slide up in stages. So on one side of the organization, this could be described as, in total, there's an ambidextrous organization. So being ambidextrous, we need to be able to operate with one hand and the other hand at the same time. So on one hand, we have the entrepreneurial system, which is characterized by operating with complexity, uncertainty, rapid change. And the things we emphasize here is rapid learning, learning through failure, being able to persevere with a particular initiative if it's going right, pull the plug if it isn't, or pivot on the strategy if it's not working. Looking for innovation, that's the entrepreneurial system. The other system is the operational system, and this is where this is the cash cow. This is the lifeblood of the organization. We need this. This is where we're having success, but as we know, that success may be being undermined with all the pressures that I mentioned earlier. This is characterized by things which are fairly familiar, routine, predictable, known. We're looking for operational excellence. Things are emphasized in terms of performance on revenue, maintenance, improvement, continuous improvement. So building upon this, if we go back to the entrepreneurial system, success tends to be hard to measure, particularly if we're using the metrics or measures of success, which are more akin to the operational system. This is also associated with the entrepreneurialism of having end-to-end collaboration, not having these specialist silos who are quite separate. Something else which is important. Okay, my screen should be back now. So if we have a look at the operational system, these things tend to be easier to measure. It could be operational excellence, it could be cash in the till, it could be revenue, it could be profit. And these things incumbent organizations are successful at measuring. And repeatable work tends to be easy to divide into specialist areas such as silos. So these are the two different sides of an organization. And I believe the right-hand side, the operational system, is for many incumbent organizations, in my experience, is overshadowing the entrepreneurial system. And the operational system is stifling the entrepreneurial system. So we're going to unpick this tonight. Before we do that, let's have a look at alignment not actually being the problem in many organizations. So what I'm going to reveal is a study that Harvard Business Review did, or at least published. And this is a survey of 8,000 managers in more than 250 companies. And this relates to strategy execution. So I know one or two people on the call, at least in the strategy space, so you may identify with this, or this may be quite enlightening, let's say. So this study showed that it's a myth that to execute means more alignment. And it's also a myth that that strategy can be just translated down with cascading objectives or simply using outcomes or key results. And that there's a belief, a misbelief, that to improve execution, we need to have tighter management by objectives. And any failure in execution is down to a breakdown in alignment. We need to get tighter on our OKRs. We need to put in more performance metrics, more meetings, more steering committees, more controls. So that's all around alignment. However, this HBR study reveals something quite important. And what this study shows is they asked these 8,000 managers, how much could you rely on your boss and how much could you rely on your direct reports to be able to get something done? And it showed that 84% of the people could trust or rely upon their boss or their direct reports to get something done. They then posed the same question to colleagues in other departments, the same question, and that reliability dropped down quite a lot to less than 60%, not much more than how much they could rely on third-party suppliers or external partners. So to me, this HBR report shows that alignment is not only the problem, in fact, it may be the wrong thing to tackle. It's looking at organizational design and the silos that we never to be create, and having a look at organizational design to refashion it, to reconceive the organization so we have the right value streams, the right people making the right decisions at the right time with the right funding is my mantra around having the right structure within organizations and the right kind of governance to give capability and autonomy and alignment to individuals and teams. So returning to that question, how can our clients create the ability to rapidly respond to change? So we need to look for opportunities where we can overcome these obstacles or recognize these obstacles and move to outcomes. So those obstacles on the left-hand side, and I want to look at 3 different opportunities to be able to overcome those obstacles. Just doing a quick time check, we've got about 45 minutes. I think we're doing okay for time. So the first one is handpicking entrepreneurs. Before we do that, I'd like to just turn back to something that I mentioned towards the start, and that's thinking about this dynamic between learning anxiety and survival anxiety. And you guys may know of this already, and it's done by a piece of work which is done by the psychologist Edgar Schein. And this is a dynamic which exists within all of us, and it's one which is becoming particularly prevalent as the world becomes more and more disrupted. And so what Edgar Schein says is that increasing the survival anxiety tends to create a strong resistance to learning. And I've been in organizations where the leadership team are describing the organizations on a burning platform, and we've got to be able to change, otherwise the end is near. And it creates an atmosphere, an environment of fear and survival anxiety, and that's not a good climate for learning and growth to occur. So what we need to do is not increase the survival anxiety. We need to be able to look for opportunities to reduce the learning anxiety. And to show that we want to learn is actually quite a profound admission. To say that I don't know, I want to raise my hand, please teach me, particularly people who have regard themselves to be an authority figure, a manager that's been around for a long time, a team member that knows the ins and outs. It's quite a place of vulnerability to say, I want to learn. And so there naturally there is a learning anxiety. So we need to find ways to reduce that anxiety. And the way in which we can do that is to convey and to share and co-create a recognition of the realities of the business to collectively understand with clarity where the business is. And we need to be able to look for one thing, for training opportunities or opportunities where people can grow and learn together. So this is around competency. We also need to look for opportunities, as many of us will know on this call, is looking for opportunities where we can coach people at an individual level and provide group support as well. So interestingly, clarity and competency, people may recognize this from the work of David Marquette. And David Marquette talks about the amount of control we can afford individuals and teams is proportional to the clarity and competency that they possess. And this is very much a leadership exercise. This is not something that we can just devolve to an external consultancy or outsource down to the teams. This needs to be a co-created environment. And with that, we can actually lower that learning anxiety. And the greater the distance between those two dynamics, the more we can create an environment where entrepreneurs can be identified and given the right kind of support. So a bit more on handpicking those entrepreneurs. And just going back to what David Marquette says, is that we've got to look for opportunities where we can push decision-making authority down to where the information exists. So that's illustrated on the left-hand side here. So if we think about the traditional organization, it's an incumbent one that's been around for many, many decades, let's say. And the information exists at the bottom of the organization. These are the teams of individuals who are closest to the customer, or closest to the problem, or closest to what success looks like. And at the top of the organization, at apex, there could be a leadership team or a single leader. And what tends to happen is information is pushed up through the different tiers of the organization to the top for a decision to come down to the bottom again. And that takes a really, really long time. And it's very, very frustrating for the people at the bottom of the organization. So we need to be able to find an opportunity on the entrepreneurial side where those leaders and those people in the product teams or the entrepreneurial teams have an ongoing close dialogue with a short feedback loop. And we can look for opportunities where we can look for pilots, look for exemplar programs where we can actually test and learn based on this model. So this is an illustration just showing the proportionality between competency and clarity and the amount of control or empowerment that we're able to afford entrepreneurial teams. And this is a gradual thing. We may want to test and learn. There could be some degree of being conservative or some nervousness. So we can test and learn together on this. Something else that's worth bringing on board is some work that Simon Wardley did. Simon Wardley's famous for his Wardley maps. But I quite like this little snippet that he's got here, is that we need to handpick people from across the organization who have this entrepreneurial mindset, who are able to deal well with rare information, are able to look for signals within the noise, look for opportunities, little nuggets of insights that are worth kind of pivoting and exploring in terms of developing new products and services for our customers and colleagues. They're able to operate in areas which are poorly understood, areas which are continuously changing. They're able to start, stop, or continue initiatives with the support and guidance of within some guardrails with the leadership team. They are happy with, I'm not too sure about that phrase, but they can deal with failure. They're able to gamble, and this is where we need to get the support of incremental, flexible governance and spend controls. They're happy with experimentation and operating with uncertainty. Okay, so this is the criteria that I've seen as successful in handpicking entrepreneurs from across the business. Okay, so we had a look at that one. Let's have a look at organising for innovation. And this is where I'd like to look for opportunities where people can unmute themselves and share their thinking. And perhaps, Giles, I'm going to invite people to put some answers within the chat window. So if you don't mind, just at the right time, I'll call out and just perhaps you can share what people are putting into the chat window.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
Awesome, thank you so much. So this is another Harvard Business Review article from about 10, 15 years ago, I think. By the way, there's references at the end of this deck as well. So once you've shared it, you can click on this and you can discover for yourself what I've learned and what I've got experience with. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be revealing 4 different organization designs, and I'm going to be asking you guys, of each of these organization designs, what percentage of these organizations were successful at breakthrough innovations? Okay, I'll say this again and guide you through this, but the first one is one where we have this functional design, and this functional design is trying to run with the existing operations, keep the lights on, and be entrepreneurial. So there's a management at the top, put crudely at the top, and then we have different business units. We have, for example, manufacturing, sales, and R&D. And I'm going to ask in a moment, for the companies that had this design, what percentage of those companies were able to achieve breakthrough innovation? Before I do that, I want to reveal the second organization design. There's going to be 2 more after this. The next one is where you have cross-functional teams. So this is operating within the existing organization, but outside the existing management hierarchy. So you have the existing teams, for example, manufacturing, sales, R&D. They're trying to do innovation and be operational, but without the support of the management team. So the first one was the same setup, but with the support of the management team. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do first of all is to, in the comments area or the chat area, let's say, of Zoom, put in the percentage of organizations that you felt were successful for the first organization design. So they're trying to be successful to achieve breakthrough innovation. So just for the first one, just feel free to put some percentages in there. And Giles, if you would be so kind as just to say what people are
Absolutely.
saying.
I'm waiting for them to come in. So from Terence, we've got 10%. From Maru, we've got 25%. From, and apologies, perhaps you can help me, is it Surgeon, 5%. Francisco, 15%. Sylvia, 10%. Alistair's actually come in with both. On the left, 30%. On the right, 10%. And then Maru's come in with the second organizational design structure, 15%. Christina's come in with 20%. Aaron's come in with 50%. And David's come in with -5%. Love it. Brilliant.
Tesh's come in counterproductive, but anyway, yeah.
Tesh's come in with 5% on the left, 10% on the right. Terence has come back in with 40% on the right, and Maru, yeah, first equals left, second equals right. Yes, correct.
Fantastic, fantastic. So before I reveal the answers from this report, I just want to say this was the study was looking at 35 attempts at breakthrough innovation across 15 business units and 9 different industries. So I'd say that's fairly representative. Okay, so let's have a look at the numbers. So for the left-hand side, that has a 25% success rate at breakthrough innovations.
So David was off by 30%.
Okay, let's have a look at the second one. Oh, by the way, if anyone didn't have a chance to put a percentage into the second one, feel free to do that now. I'll just pause for 10 seconds. Okay, let's reveal 0%. 0%. So remember, the difference between the left and the right is that the right-hand side one, these individual teams are trying to do operationalism and entrepreneurialism without the support of the management team. Okay, I'm now going to show you the third of 4, and I'm going to ask you the same question after I've described it. So this one, let's have a look. So these were unsupported teams. So this is a separate team, separate to the existing operational teams, and also outside of the management hierarchy. So these are separate to the operational teams and separate from the management hierarchy. So again, in the chat window, please type in the percentage of organizations with this design who you believe were successful at breakthrough innovation.
So Dean, can I ask, do you mean like when sometimes companies create like an innovation lab, like outside of what everybody else does, and they've got their different people out there in a different building and they do whatever they want, or that kind of thing, yeah?
Absolutely, something like a Skunk Works or a Bell Labs, but without management integration.
We've got the first results coming in from Tesh. We've got 50%. From Alistair, 10% or less. From Terence, an exacting 44%. Maru's come back. I'll stay with 15% from my previous guess. Surgeon's got 30%. Alistair's now hedging his bets now. Christina's come in with 30. Rohit's come in with 20. Sylvia's got 35. Francisco's got 25.
Okay, thank you, Giles. Thank you, everyone. So, revealing the answers, 0% of the organizations studied were successful at breakthrough innovations with this organization design. I was shocked by this. It's quite revealing. Again, I'm going to be linking to the study so you guys can have a look at it in your own time. Okay, last one. So this one was the ambidextrous organization. So there's existing business lines, operational, and there's this new emergent business activity. But the key difference is that the emergent entrepreneurial, emergent business area does integrate itself with the management hierarchy. So please put in your percentages into the chat window. What percentage of this organizational design was successful with breakthrough innovation?
Okay, so we're getting some results in already. 70% from Alistair, 35% mean average from Maru. Surgeon's got 45%, Rohit 50%, Tesh is 60%. Wow, we got some really high numbers this time. Francisco coming in at 35%, Christina 30%, Terence, I'm loving the exacts, 33%. Awesome. David, greater than 50%. Sylvia 40%, and Aaron 75%.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answers now. 90% of this organization design was successful with breakthrough innovation. I think, Alistair, you may have been the closest of 80%. Is that right?
I think that's correct. Alistair was in at 70.
70. But,
yeah. Oh no, Aaron was the highest.
Aaron,
75%.
Well done, Aaron.
Oh, good man. Well done. Well done. Okay.
I just think it's fascinating. This study is really interesting, Dean. Thank you for sharing it. I think the key is, you're going to tell us what. I'm going to let you carry on.
No. I was actually going to open up and allow people just to share some thoughts. Alistair, please take the stage.
For me, anybody who's listened to 3 minutes of me knows that what I think about leadership and how important it is. And I think each time the thing that seemed to be, that I found consistent, was that it was how supported the teams were and therefore how the leadership was acting. Is that right?
I'd say so. It's quite evidential that should be the case. Anybody else got something on their mind?
Yeah. So I lived this case when I worked at Honeywell in the basically early 2000s, because we basically reorganized ourselves post the failed GE merger and sort of had to completely pivot as a company. And, and we're behind because everything was baked into, the GE deal, which was killed by the EU. And then basically the company had to, sort of reinvent itself pretty quickly. And this was also while, post 9/11 and recession and everything else happening all at the same time. So, and the dot-com crash, whatever, right? So it was like five whams in like 36 months, basically. And so we really sort of just reorganized basically this business case.
That's really fascinating that we have you on the call. Thank you, Arun. That's first-hand experience. And no, I'm really pleased you're on this call to share that real-life experience with us.
I've had two like negative experiences of like businesses trying to innovate, and the root cause I felt was they set up like an innovation lab, and they used all the right terminology, but there were two things going wrong. The management didn't fully buy into it. It was like window dressing, and then the second bit is they gave teams too much. They went from a traditional organization to giving these independent teams far too much freedom without any leadership, without any structure. And then when the teams weren't delivering the goods because they had flaky practices or flaky technology, management then caved in and they went back to type. And I feel like now a lot of organizations are trying to be cool with bringing in people in shorts and giving them freedom, but they're not giving them that like halfway house of saying, look, this is the foundation, this is the DevOps tooling, this is how you Scrum, go and do what you like. And then after 6 months, come up with the goods, and then it doesn't work.
Yeah, thank you, Tesh. Yeah, thank you. I recognise that as well. Anybody else would like to share thoughts?
I've got one experience. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, please go ahead.
One company I've worked at where we did have a separate R&D team. They had it before I joined. And they were a great team, and they were in the same open plan office that everybody else was in, all the rest of the devs and ops team. One side effect was that was, as much as that R&D team were liked by everyone, they were also resented because the message from management was those people get to do all this fun stuff. And as everyone viewed it, everyone else just get on with the ordinary work. So it kind of stifled people's kind of innovative thinking and creativity, as well as making them feel resentful of people who seem to have a better job than they did. Even though everyone was doing good work. So it was kind of a side effect of feelings, I suppose, that it generated that stifled innovation within the company, whilst they were trying to do a great thing by having an R&D team.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. I'm not sure if it's just me, but you did come across on my side a little bit kind of muffled, but hopefully everyone got that. Thank you for sharing. I'd like to move on because the time is now 21 minutes past the hour, and I know someone's got to drop off in 9 minutes, and Giles has got to go to his anniversary 15 minutes after that. So,
yeah,
so
that's it. 7:45.
Okay, so let's move on. So we've had a look at handpicking entrepreneurs. We had a look at a study that looked at organisational design, setting themselves up for innovation. The other bit, and the bit that we shouldn't forget, is the importance of those people on the operational side. So operational integration. And I'm going to be talking about some work and also some of my experiences, but particularly some work by this academic, Mary Albeen. The spelling is going to be revealed in a few slides' time. And she works in the complexity space. And I got to know her work a couple of years ago, and it's really, really interesting stuff. But before I do so, I'd like to just share some of the current emphasis that organizations have, particularly with human resources. And this is a good thing that they're doing. And I'm just going to reveal what it is, but I'm also going to bring on board something else, which I don't think many organizations or HR are looking at in particular. And I think this may be the next stage for HR. But first of all, let's just have a look at what they're looking at now. So they tend to take a human capital approach to being able to recognize talent and improve talent and support the growth of colleagues in their organization. So the things which they tend to look at is leadership competency models, leadership development programs. This is all stuff which they've been doing for years, and there's nothing particularly wrong with it. Employment engagement surveys and so forth. These are done every quarter, every year, and the results are revealed, and their strategies and initiatives built off the back of these findings, all well and good. Talent management, performance management. But what I'd like to introduce is, as well as human capital, there's a phenomenon which has been studied and is beginning to have a bit of success in organisation. And that phenomenon is looking at social capital. So let's have a look at what that is. So if we, and this is absolutely natural, this is how humans as we operate since like day zero, this is how we have grown to be successful. And so in terms of organisation design, we've got to be able to design to recognise how we operate in a social setting. So we tend to have high group cohesion in our teams or our particular areas. So group cohesion looks at how connected an individual is within their group and to others in the same group. It recognises as it's highly cohesive. There are many redundant connections. If we have a look at this blue cluster of people here, there are many redundant connections. And information can be shared really, really quickly. And there's a high level of trust. Incidentally, I would say that this third bullet point is somewhat challenged when we work from home or working remotely as a consequence of COVID. That's an aside, that's why I'm always a favour of being in the office of face-to-face communication and collaboration as much as possible. But that's an aside. So social capital recognises the importance of group cohesion and recognises that there's less cohesion with groups which may be upstream or downstream, or if I'm in an entrepreneurial space, I have less cohesion, quite naturally, with those on the operational side. So the benefits of looking at things through a social capital lens is, and also the importance of looking for individuals who can act as bridges between those two different areas. Say, if we have a look at the left-hand side of where my mouse is, hopefully you can see it, I'm looking at the cluster in the second half of the diagram, that blue cluster. Let's say that's the entrepreneurial team. And let's say the green cluster is the operational team. Quite naturally, it's very human for us to not be so connected with the other side. And so what we need to do is identify people within the organization that have natural social capital, who act as natural bridges to be able to bring these two worlds together. So it's bridge connections, and these people naturally exist in organizations. And we can invite them into a role, not impose a role on them, but invite them into a role where we can say, you're doing fantastic work, we want to recognize this, and what we intend to do is to bring these two different areas a little bit closer together so they can collaborate and they can co-create and they can coexist a bit more closely than they were before. So really importantly, this is an invitation, not an imposition upon these people with high bridging capital. And they act as brokers. So they know the mannerisms, their characteristics, the quirks, how best these two different sides operate, and they can look for opportunities for that integration with the entrepreneurial side, with the operational side. So this is the work of Mary Albeen. I really would recommend just seeking her out on YouTube and across the web. So what she also recognizes is that the exist and ordered approach of organizations is that we have the operational system and we have the entrepreneurial system, and there's a natural tension between the two. And as I described earlier, the operational system tends to stifle and dominate and overshadow the entrepreneurial system. And quite often, bizarrely enough, we actually need to look for tension and create a safe space where that tension can be looked at and examined. And there are some principles that we may be familiar with is have strong beliefs but loosely held, making use of data, having a look at insights from our customers and colleagues to be able to test our assumptions and convictions. And this should be a collective space which the people with bridging capital should explore by bringing closer together those people on the operational side and the entrepreneurial side. So she describes a special place as the adaptive space, and it recognizes those on the entrepreneurial side, they have a need to produce and they have a need to show current results, but those on the entrepreneurial side, they're innovating, their pressure is a need to innovate, and they have a push or a need to be novel. So by bringing these two groups together and using practices, which I'm going to reveal in a minute, we actually create a viable future where we allow the organization to pivot and adapt and be nimble in a fast changing world. So emergence occurs here. So emergence, those small bets which are successful, those small ideas that the entrepreneurs are finding has a problem solution fit for customers and stakeholders. We have some semblance, some insights. We need to be able to scale those. We need to be able to nail those, and we need to be able to use the resources and expertise of the people on the operational side. And so that emergence occurs in the adaptive space. So a bit more on the operational side, or operational integration. So one thing which I think is quite profound is innovation is not as much, it's as much a social phenomenon as a technical one. When I used to think about innovation, I used to think, oh, it's about blockchain, it's even about DevOps tool chains, it's about, I don't know, bioinformatics or something which is kind of sexy and new and kind of very technology based. But what I'm realizing, and perhaps what you guys are also have come across as well, is that innovation is a social phenomenon as much as a technical one, if not more of a social phenomenon than anything else. And to scale, innovators must work with those on the operational side that have resource, that have access to the cash, they have access to supplies, they have access to a depth of expertise of what the market is or how our customers operate. So we need to bring those two areas together. So some of the practices that Mary Albeen has discovered, and I have, I found to be successful, some of the practices and principles. So liberating structures. Some people on this video may be familiar with liberating structures. It can be described as a collection or a group of facilitation techniques where in a social setting we be able to solve problems and develop solutions. A simple set, it's fantastic. Worth it just experimenting in one or two of those with like-minded people. Another important factor is not to push away tension or conflict or disagreement in the professional setting with the right coaching and support. We should face into that disagreement and say, okay, we have a different opinion, fantastic. I'm thinking about Steve Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It talks about getting beyond the win-win. We think win-win is a good place to be, but there's a stage beyond that and say, for example, Giles, oh, you've got a different opinion to me. Fantastic. You see the world different to me. Your perception of reality is different. Tell me more. And so this is getting beyond how we tend to normally operate, and we actually embrace differences. We test arguments with customer feedback. As I mentioned before, strong opinions are weakly held or loosely held is a phrase which is often shared in this space. Let's see what else there is. So again, thinking about Barry O'Reilly, he's made popular the term, as others have, of think big, start small, learn fast. Find a friend. So we may have occasions where, supposing we're on the operational side and we're trying to innovate, and we really need to get access, or we really need to scale something, and perhaps there's some natural resistance on the operational side. Let's just find a friend to talk to who are able to become an ally on the operational side, who could be an innovator, early adopter, and just start conversations. With their support, we're able to start good conversations, but with more people on the operational side. So I want to give an example that I've got with a large retailer. I've worked for a number of different retailers, and this particular retailer really embraced, without knowing it, they didn't know it was a social capital approach. And what we did, we were looking for opportunities to change the front of store customer service experience in the large supermarkets. And what was happening is they had colleagues trapped behind this customer service desk. You can see this on the right-hand side. So what we did, we had these people on the entrepreneurial side, and they were mavericks. They wanted to do something which was never done before, and that was to close down that customer service desk and allow colleagues with the right coaching and support to be able to actually go and greet customers who looked like they needed help, or they looked like they had a complaint, actually be proactive. So we coach and train these individuals. But as you can imagine, with hundreds of stores, not everyone is going to be open to this in terms of the store managers and the regional managers. But what we did, we found friends on the operational side. We found one regional manager who was open to this idea. They could see what success looked like. And he found 3 store managers who were also innovators on the operational side. We brought them on board. And so if you have a look at the adoption curve here, we found those innovators and those early adopters, and we test and learned with those. And then we found that socially, people share stories, they share successes. And we found that change happened at a natural level. Store manager speaks to store manager, regional manager speaks to regional manager. And we found that change actually happened without us actually pushing it. So we found that we were able to bridge that gap to the early majority and the late majority, and we were able to excel things at a faster, more natural pace. And we were sensitive to the positions and the uniqueness of different regional managers and different operators, such as store managers. So that's a real life example of leveraging social capital, even though we didn't know we were doing it at the time. So I'm just closing now. So the question is, how can organizations create the ability to rapidly respond to change? And what I've shared with you guys is we can do that by recognizing the realities and closing that gap between those on the entrepreneurial side and those on the operational side. So we had to look at 3 different realities. We had to look at pattern entrainment. This happens at an individual, team, and organizational level. We had to look at that dynamic and that unfortunate gap that often exists between operators and entrepreneurs. And we had a look at a study which shows that alignment is not always the answer. We also had a look at 3 techniques, handpicking the entrepreneurs from across the organization and bringing them on board to create this fantastic space. We also had to look at organizing, structuring organizations. We had to look at 4 different business models. We had a bit of a quiz to find out which one was the most successful. And we also finished off with operational integration. I'm going to open up to questions first in a moment, but before doing so, once you get hold of this deck, I'm going to share the URL again. There are references to each of the pieces that I've shared with you. So Giles, perhaps we can open up for questions now, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Dean, first of all, thank you very much. As many people have said tonight, for fantastic insights. Thank you for sharing with this group. And yes, let's please open it up to the room. And Rohit's got his hand up, or he's clapping, one or the other. So Rohit, have you got a question?
No, I was just saying thanks, Dean. It was brilliant.
So some people use the hand up thing for saying thank you. Some people using it for raise a question. So brilliant, brilliant.
Cheers, Rohit. Thank you.
Has anyone got any questions? Obviously for Dean and fantastic talk that we've had this evening.
I've got a ton. I have to prioritize mine and let them flow in one after the other. But I can start with the first one if you allow.
Please.
All right. I didn't get the case or the example with the store chain. What they really did with these social capital, social networks, etc., and what outcome did that produce?
Yeah. So this is one where retail is highly operational, and they tend to repeat success and repeat procedure quite a lot, even if that becomes unsuccessful. And we had a challenge with customer service in many of the stores, and the entrepreneurial team, the team who was set up to try and improve this, recognized that a lot of the colleagues who focus on customer service tend to not be that proactive because they were trapped behind that customer service desk and they're waiting for customers to approach them with a particular complaint. So we had a hypothesis that if we encourage those colleagues to go out and greet customers and be available to customers as a, you know, someone on their feet all the time. They could actually sense and respond to what's actually happening in the store and deliver better customer service. The challenge is that operating customer service from a customer service desk has been around for many, many decades. And it's literally part of the furniture. Many of the store managers and area managers are quite skeptical to closing down the desk. And so the entrepreneurial team needed to find a connection on the operational side to run this experiment, rather than just force the change through quite dispassionately. So in fact, we had ex-store managers in the entrepreneurial team. And so they knew area managers and existing store managers who maybe see this as appropriate and have an appetite for it. So we used the social connections of the ex-store managers to reach out to those people and run some experiments with only one area manager, first of all, who then found 3 store managers to test and learn. And things went wrong, but we learned through those failures in a small, contained manner. Does that help answer the question?
Oh, okay. It was a kind of ad hoc experimentation network that shared and leveraged multiple learnings, and try to make the most out of it for the whole organization, right? Some early adopters.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if this failed for whatever reason, we would pivot and move to a different strategy. And even if that strategy failed, we'll pull the plug on the initiative and keep the team together to invite them to explore a whole different initiative. Because remember, it's very, very hard to handpick and identify these people who have an entrepreneurial mindset I just described earlier.
Okay, so we got 2 more questions. Sorry, Maru. Okay, no, good, thanks. I was going to say we've got 2 more questions. We got one from Brianna, and then finally we got one from David. So Brianna, over to you.
Okay, so thank you for taking my question, Dean. You know me, I always like to look at public policy, and I'm looking at the quote. I didn't bring this up earlier, but when we were looking at Jack Welch's, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. Well, how does this apply to policy? You know, like for example, we're seeing it in societies now that governments aren't and even elected officials aren't, or unelected officials aren't keeping up with the rate of change. And is the entrepreneur mindset applicable to outside the corporate and nonprofit world? That was a mouthful. Let me know if I have to explain that.
No, I understood enough, I think, to give hopefully a good response. And I think with public policy, and perhaps I can extend this to politics, it's difficult. It's really difficult on the policy side because the messaging's got to be right, and if things fail, it can make the headlines, even if it's a small scale, or the opposition can be quite vocal and articulate, and things can just unravel in a way which is unhelpful, let's say. I'm not sure what the answer is. Perhaps working in the open and have a shared mindset as what good looks like, and being able to test and learn. So I think to answer your question, I think it's what I've shared as a valuable approach for the non-profit side. But the challenges and pressures are somewhat different, particularly with politics and public policy. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Dean. And then lastly, David, we have you finishing us off this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. That was a great talk. So what I'm thinking is, so this integration, right, between this kind of two mindsets, right, 2 very different mindsets. And in my experience, I find that you have different personality types that might feel more comfortable doing one or the other. And I think that may be why sometimes you see companies trying to say, well, we're going to do an innovation lab where, like we saw in the example you gave earlier, and put those innovation type people doing what they do. and we operation people, we're going to keep on doing what we do. And then you don't have this integration, right? But what I'm thinking is that companies need to embrace both, right? And to the point that should it be the same person doing both, or the same team, right? And then the key then is to be able to identify when you behave as an innovator and when you don't, right? Like when do you explore and try and find different options and experiment? But at some point, once you found the thing that works, right? Once you find you've tried different options and some fail and you keep failing, and then the one that really works, the one that really brings value, then at this point you need to stop experimenting, right? You need to take that thing and then exploit it and deliver. You know. And I think for me, the difficulty like companies have, or teams or whatever, that is to be able to jump between these two mindsets, depending on where they are in that phase, if that's the right word. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's a question, you've raised a question that I don't have the answer to, in terms of, can one person be both operational and entrepreneurial? And I suspect that it's going to be very, very hard to find an individual who can operate on both sides, even flip between the two sides. And I think we need to recognize where individuals gravitate towards. They may have a natural tendency to excel in the operational space, to look for ways in which we can squeeze a lot out of small margins, or operational excellence, where there could be another person who's more comfortable and can excel at innovation and learning through failure. Not that we're looking for failure, but it's a fantastic learning opportunity. So I suspect an individual typically on average has a predisposition for one side or the other, and we need to be able to recognize that and design and support our teams and organizations around that disparity, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
Giles, I'm just going to reshare my screen because I know we're closing now. Hopefully that's come through, because I just want to say thank you, everybody, and I'll allow you to close, Giles. And if people, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or drop me an email, and also the slides are available at URL in the bottom right-hand corner. But I'll hand over to you, Giles. Thank you so much.
No, fantastic. Dean, brilliant thought leadership as ever. We could have probably still been sat here for another couple of hours quite easily, mulling this through and asking questions. I presume if anybody has got any further questions, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn or through your website, where they sign up for the Agilist as well. Nice little plug again. And look, I really look forward to seeing everybody next week for another Agile Expertise and Leading in an Agile World meetup. So Dean, once again, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to everybody who came here. It's you guys that actually make these meetups work, and it's great to see familiar faces every time we do this. So I look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thanks very much.
Take care. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Giles.
Awesome.
All right.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.